Hello and welcome to ASB TDC TV, a product of a partnership between the University of Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center and the Northwest Arkansas Council Small Business Emergency Assistance Program. In this series, we're talking with small businesses, experts, and ASB TDC consultants about the relevant and right now topics and solutions for small business. I'm Amy Robinson.
Hi everybody, my name is Chris Case and we are here today with Devin from the city of Fayetteville, and you have not had a lunch in about 4 months. I doubt you have slept in 4 months, so tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
Oh, thank you. I'm the Director of Economic Vitality for the city of Fayetteville. And this is a new position. It's about 3 years old, and it's an internal city staff that manages economic development. We have a department of two. We manage two economic development contracts. One's been in place for about 4 years, the other for about a decade. Our work really got started on March 13th. I think everybody's did. In a time when there was a lot of unknowns taking place for businesses. At bare minimum, what we decided that we could do was to ensure they didn't have to use Google or social media to find answers or relevant information. Through that, we developed what I think is probably the most detailed repository of timed information for businesses for this pandemic on our website. We stopped updating that daily about probably a month ago when things slowed down, and we'll pick back up as changes happen, like the Paycheck Protection Program hopefully getting extended. And so we've worked on that. Mayor Jordan also established a Small Business Resiliencies Task Force, and that is a group of local entrepreneurs, bankers, small business assistance organizations, et cetera, foundation membership. There are members that comes together once a week to really help us to figure out what we can do to help and what can actually be impactful to help with businesses. And that's, I'm sure we'll talk a lot about City of Fayetteville's utilization of Act 812, which is the authorizing legislation for what are called entertainment districts. We're not calling it that, but we'll talk more about that. That's been a really big project for us that we've spent the past few months on, simply because while I think every business has been impacted, the tax receipts are showing now, none more so than bars and restaurants.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that we talk a lot about on this call is just how quickly things changed, and how where we thought we were and where we thought we were going also changed, and the adaptations that have had to be made. And, you know, very specifically in the ordinance that you are talking about, and what we'd love for you to share today is kind of, it was already in the process, it was already in the works, it was already in need, but what were the additional needs and changes, and maybe even the urgency that became more apparent in developing that ordinance, and then how is it going to help?
Absolutely. One of the big challenges in Arkansas is municipalities or counties, et cetera, have very little to any control over alcohol laws or liquor laws. And I won't get into the merits or demerits of our current liquor laws. That's a whole nother luncheon session that I'm happy to talk about. And I think a lot of our restaurant and bar owners would be happy to talk about. But Act 812 is a special law that was crafted by cities. I remember before the legislative session being in conversations going, this is such a simple thing. Yes, let's pursue it. And what Act 812 does is, we recognized, you've seen these pop up. Eureka Springs did one, though their council, it is no longer there. But you see them in Arkadelphia, you see one in Little Rock, Hot Springs, et cetera. They're all across the state. And I think in Northwest Arkansas, you don't have any existing districts. Salem Springs did try. That was in their council session. And their economic developer, their rationales was our rationale as the why behind this now. And so we actually started that last, August. An item got introduced, and it didn't, we needed more time with businesses. I'll just say that. We needed their expertise, their input. I think it may have surprised some people. And we said, you know what, we're going to give this the time and attention it deserves. And I don't understand the inner workings of a restaurant and bar. I feel I have a much better understanding now. So I needed this to be crafted by the businesses that would be using it. And that took us on a 7-month process, 8 months now, if you take it, to get this ordinance back to the city council. And while we have other projects that we worked on at that time, obviously, if you saw, we actually did a pedal carriage ordinance in February, and that was in anticipation of this law. We were planning on getting the outdoor refreshment ordinance to the city council in March, and then our worlds changed on March 13th, and that was not a sense of urgency at that point in time. Just trying to not just put out the fires, but really have a hard time putting into words that first month of work. And so our focus shifted. And it became very clear, as with the task force group, and it became very clear that, this isn't going away. And that with the Department of Health guidelines that are needed and necessary in regards to occupancy restrictions and the social distancing needed inside of these establishments, outside is safer. And there's a lot of research that has shown that, and I know that a lot of that research changes, and it was just such a new virus for us. But outside seems safer, and it's not just about that, it's about consumer perception too, and consumer safety. How do you safely patronize these businesses? You could lift the occupancy restrictions right now. Does that solve the problem? No, it doesn't. People don't feel safe, rightfully so, especially with the hotspot here in the region. And so support them outside. And so we really turned our attention back to the outdoor refreshment area. And our whole process all along, and with any other cities that were looking at this, we wanted to keep the trend of intense communication and involvement with our businesses, and specifically our bars and restaurants. And our downtown's unique. Dixon Street's wildly different than the square. And so to say that we have a product that runs from Mountain Street to Watson, which is north of Dixon, that all of those businesses have, come to those general terms on, is a huge feat for us. I'm excited about it. But you traditionally, in other cities that have this, you see Toledo's a great example. They have 2 districts, one right next to each other, because their Adams Street is very similar to our Dixon. It's different than the rest of their downtown. And so we got that to city council, and they passed it unanimously, 7-1 that night, with an emergency clause that enabled it to take effect as soon as it could be published in the paper, and so a few days later. And that ordinance does 3 things broadly. It's a very simple ordinance, but it has teeth, and it has teeth from an enforceability side for patrons. And that was really where the business is added to this process. I think it's probably the longest ordinance text in the state, but it has enforceable points for our police department on patron and attendee behavior that could otherwise jeopardize a business's liquor license. So you can't take an alcoholic drink into another bar. That is not a Fayetteville rule. It is now, but it's also a violation of state law. And so those types of things, even under the outdoor refreshment area, if I'm with somebody who's 21, I can't give them a drink. They have to be ID'd by that bar. Right. And so we did a lot of things to really shore up that we want to protect our businesses, and that's how the ordinance was written. And
so Devin,
yes.
Can you kind of, so if you're not a restaurant, you don't know all the rules and restrictions that that you have around you, or you are a patron and you're wondering about, how this affects you, because, one of the things that you have mentioned is that, a lot of the restrictions and the oversight was on the businesses, and now there are some things that are patron specific. So just give us an example potentially of either a business that's doing this or a business that could do it, and just kind of what that looks like and what that looks kind of from the ground level, if you will.
3 ways businesses can get involved. 3 ways attendees can participate in this. The first one is a very subtle change, and that is for sidewalk cafes. It abolishes the requirement to have a perimeter fence around a sidewalk cafe, which I've always thought is silly. And so it gets rid of that requirement, and it enables patrons to possess and consume at that sidewalk cafe. You'll note I did not say serving. That's something else I'm working on. I'm trying to work with the state. But Act 812 does not give a city the ability to regulate the serving of alcohol. It's a distinct difference, and words really matter with this ordinance. So we can have patrons that, if it's a sidewalk cafe, businesses can apply. It's a simple process through development services, and we've had a few come in. So that's the first thing it does. Now, the second thing it does is with events, and this is something to look forward to in the future. Again, I've always thought beer gardens were silly. I think everybody has. And when you travel out of state, many states don't have these. I was at a mile-long street fair in Chicago last year, and I asked the police officer, where's the beer garden? And they literally didn't know what I was talking about. And so it's a social norm in so many places not to have to stay in a little fenced-in area. This abolishes that. And so this also does something else really cool for events. Traditionally, an event will shut down a road and cut off businesses from consumers. Now an event has the option to solely source their alcohol from those businesses in that area who can sell to patrons in. And so those events can help increase sales for bars and restaurants. And so once the pandemic is over and it's safe to gather in that fashion again, that's something to look forward to. The second is the biggest, and this is where I'll probably share my screen, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Just so people can learn more about this. And if we go to our homepage on the city's economic development website, and I'll share that with you, you go under Fayetteville info, you can click on outdoor refreshment area. And we have things in here like sidewalk cafe application, etc. If you want to learn about the history, there's an extremely detailed history page on this. But you'll see over here, sidewalk cafes, outdoor dining options, which actually isn't tied to the outdoor refreshment area. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then the pilot program. So this is the big one. This is exactly what everybody thinks of when they think about an open consumption district. This is walking around with a drink in your hand.
Yeah.
And that's the third way that we wanted to be able to support businesses. So you can learn about this here. And so this is the staff's proposed area. And proposed is the key word here. We're still flexible. This is driven by businesses, and every business in this area got an email yesterday asking for their feedback on this. Staff has proposed certain dates and times, and this was actually a pre-COVID recommendation of starting on slow days of Sunday through Wednesday, and just to prove concept to our businesses. Well, now every day is a slow day for businesses. And so we felt it was extremely important to maintain consistency with all of the public communication we did. And so we're planning on starting on those slower days. If it wants to be grown from there, if the businesses make that clear and our police department's okay, we can assess that then. But there's no problem in starting slow. We know we're going to learn something. So we talk about rules. These are them. They're on our webpage here. And the businesses is simple. They can charge for the cup if they want to, whatever that dollar value is, to let that cup go out the door. We do recognize there's some increased staffing costs with a program like this. We'll be providing those cups at no cost to the businesses and the wristbands. But attendees, they've got quite a few more rules when this pilot program starts. No littering, obviously. Don't loiter on private or leased property. Those are probably two of the biggest. Stay within the signs, and so long as you do that and you don't give your drink to somebody else, you're going to be good. So you can learn more about this here. We'll keep it updated. And yeah, so let me stop this share. So those are the three things it does. Businesses you'll be able to support a bar or restaurant out the door. Now, when you want to talk about something else with the outdoor refreshment area, and that is outdoor dining, that is not directly associated with this. I'm happy to talk about that whenever. It's just not tied to this ordinance.
Right. So I do know that, and again, you based a lot of this on the liquor laws, and we're trying to work within that because of the safety measures through COVID. So even though this was thought about beforehand, and you use some other examples of other cities where there are districts and some of these ordinances in place. And so now COVID has kind of made that even more urgent because the outdoor spaces are that much more important. So let's just say that I'm going to go to the Fayetteville Square. The other thing about outdoor dining is sometimes it's about space. Is there, are we, talking about utilizing parking spaces, sidewalks, some of those things, because not every restaurant has that outdoor space. So this kind of helps with that as well, or there's something else that helps with that. So just paint us a picture of, you know, Chris and I are gonna, we're in an isolation group together so we can hang out, and we're gonna go to downtown Fayetteville and be as healthy and safe as possible while enjoying our local restaurants and amenities. So what does that look like under this ordinance?
Absolutely, there's options, and one of the big ones is not tied to this ordinance. And what we'll talk about with this ordinance, what it does is the sidewalk cafe can be an extension. And so it's not just, when we say sidewalk cafe, we're looking at other, we'll grab other property as well if they have it. You know, I can't speak for a business, but I'll give an example of Maxine's. That those parking spaces down the southern side of the building could be great seating for their patrons. So that could be looked at under that. Now, parking spaces that are metered, those are tied to parking bonds. And so there has to be the integrity of the bond. Not going to get into that, but those are there. And actually, you see a parklet on Dixon Street. If a business wants to pursue something like that where they spread out into a parking space, there's a process here with tactical urbanism that they can use. And tactical urbanism, it's basically how residents can place new stop signs, you see paint street crossings, etc. We've had a lot of those projects over the years. But the other thing the city council did, it is applicable to downtown, but also citywide, is when you think about code enforcement and how those ordinances are written, restaurants can expand into their private or leased parking spots without asking, no permits, just do it. And so that expansion citywide. However, again, the serving of alcohol issue comes up. And many of those businesses are outside of this proposed outdoor freshman area boundary. And even if they were within it, the serving of alcohol issue is still there. So how do you negate that? Well, the state has provided a path to negate that, and that is an ABC rule change for outdoor dining service that enables a restaurant, not a bar. And so that's another issue where I'm slightly frustrated. Enables a restaurant to temporarily expand their liquor license boundary. We don't charge anything for that review. That is a really quick review. We're going to do a zoning verification letter for that restaurant. We've got a letter from our mayor to ABC that we give to that restaurant stating we are supportive of any of these in our city that meet ABC standards. And they have to have a boundary. And so I mentioned on our last call that people saw the picture of the Soma dining district in Little Rock, and it had this big flagging tape around it. Well, they're likely trying to do this, and so the outdoor service. And so that is a way where the wait staff can run drinks out and serve at those tables, and that's citywide. Super simple process. We wanted to make that easy as well. So a restaurant theoretically could go ahead and do outdoor dining in their leased or owned parking spaces that they have, and then they could just wait for the alcohol portion to get that approval from ABC. We've got about 4 that have applied for that, and we're on day 3. I'm kind of waiting to see how quickly that approval process at the state level happens. So those are the options there. Now, if somebody does want to talk about a specific parking space in downtown, I would just challenge them to contact us or parking division, and let's talk about, you know, how could you potentially do a temporary lease for that space, etc.
That is great. I'm so glad that you put this all into place. And I mean, you've been kind of under the gun to do this, but is this something that will be permanent? Is this something that's going to kind of stick in stone and continue on after our COVID experience? So
the outdoor freshman area is governed by a phasing plan. Again, that was developed in pre-COVID. It was significantly adapted to the pandemic. Sidewalk cafes in this area are here to stay. The event changes are here to stay. There is a sunset clause on the pilot program, the walking around. And we put that in there because that was our promise to our businesses, our promises to our stakeholders and our anchor institutions in downtown. A recognition that we're going to learn a lot. We're going to stub our toe and we're going to pivot. And It also was, I think, the biggest point that we got from an anchor institution that was probably the best piece of feedback was you can't make a long-term decision about something like this without assessing it under conditions of full capacity. And knowing when that time is going to be, no one knows that. And so we'll likely have to extend that sunset, but for 2020, it's here. And we hope to activate the pilot program extremely soon. There are just some major logistical challenges in the supply chain right now, and we're seeing those as well.
Absolutely. That's great. And I'm glad that you mentioned how to get in touch with you, because I do know that while this is happening in Fayetteville, there are probably other cities around the state and examples around the country. So let people know how it is best to get in touch with you, or to get more information about this. If they are a business, to contact you to participate, or if they are inquiring as a patron or just somebody interested in learning more from you, how do we get in touch with you?
Absolutely. My email is the best, just if I'm remote working, etc. And that is dhowland@fayetteville-ar.gov. You can shoot me an email at any time. And I hope if I've written the outdoor refreshment area webpage as well, it should answer most questions and keep people in tune. The other thing in regards to, if you're a restaurant or a bar in another city and you're beginning these conversations, one of the things that we did that's actually on the history page, if you go through it, is we did research of these open consumption districts across the country, from California to New York, Chicago, down to Texas, assessing these various communities. We heard this isn't something that happens in a college town. That could not be further from the truth. These things are everywhere, and they're in the majority of SEC cities. The trick is, how do you make it the most popular, unpopular thing about your city? Because then you have a successful district.
I love that. And that's a great note to end on, even though I know we could talk to you further. And we probably will again. If you are joining us, thank you for joining us. If you have a suggested topic, a question that you need answered, someone that you'd like to hear from, or a story you'd like to share, please contact us at bizhelp, BUSHELP @uark.edu, and put TV in the subject line. If you are interested in benefiting from our one-on-one consulting free, please sign up at sbtdc.uark.edu. Thank you again for being here, Devin. It's been a pleasure working with you, and look forward to everything that happens.
Thank you. For all y'all are doing. We appreciate you.